Sam Portland, welcome to the Soccer Queens podcast.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. Can I be a soccer king then? Can you be a
Yeah,
soccer queen? There
you
we
could
go.
be the soccer king. Yeah, I think well, you might be because speed is such a popular topic with my audience. And I think there's this obsession with developing speed in the soccer community. But at the same time, a lot of soccer players, A, don't make enough time for it, and B, they train it wrong. So we're going to get into everything speed development today for soccer players. But before we do, why don't you give the listeners a background on your coaching career and who you work with today?
There's going to be some interesting topics to discuss, but my background grew up playing football, actually soccer. My dad played over here in the UK, and then we got involved in rugby. And I was skinny, fast, and speed came to me. They stuck me on the wing, trying to go professional. Broke my leg the day a pro scout came to see me. It was like a real sliding doors moment, but he actually turned up to the wrong club. So I ended up breaking my leg. 2 years, 2 and a bit years later, that same coach ended up hiring me to work for the academy, the professional rugby team. And then it started to become, for me, after my journey of rehabbing my own broken leg, which was a couple of failed operations and stuff, I had to really invest into, well, how do I get my speed back first and foremost? I've still got many years to play sport myself. And then that in turn allowed me to really start to break down what I had taken for granted and really start to understand how training and my best efforts would help the athletes that I work with. And these were prospective, 17, 18-year-old rugby players. And then fast forward, I ended up getting promoted quite quickly. I worked in the English Premiership rugby for a good few years. As you do, professional sport, things change, you move clubs. And then I ended up taking a leap and going out on my own consulting. And the phone rings one day, and I got to work with one of the NFL guys that were from the UK. And that kind of really changed a lot for me and opened up many doors into a lot of different sports and teaching and all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, now I spend a lot more of my time after probably 15 years, I spend a lot more of my time working with coaches to teach them how to better spend their time, better serve their athletes, and actually get better results on the field. So that's kind of what I do. That's a real short version, but there's loads of stories that'll probably come their way.
So you just came out with a new book. What inspired you to write this book and give a fresh new perspective on speed development?
I grew up dyslexic, and I still am. Although you don't grow out of it. Um, but sport was my identity at school. I wasn't academic in any way, and I was in like a personal development group, and they brought an author on, and he was like, "Yeah, anyone can write a book," and I was like, I'm going to write a book. I want to rewrite that story. When you're a kid, all the red pen on your homework, that like dreaded red pen, um, I would, I was like, right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to write a book and I'm going to break that story because I'd spend, I've hosted about 20, 25 of my own speaking events, and you still can't get the message out well enough. And you can't, social media has completely changed in the last 10 years where, now you have to be an absolute lunatic on the camera to get any form of attention to inspire someone, which is not quite, I'm not really about that. And so I was like, I'm going to write a book. One way that I want to leave a legacy is to do that. So I was really actually quite gifted with my name, Sam Portland. It's Sports was my nickname. They called me Sports. So my system is Sports Speed System. And I thought about everything that I have learned and everything that I have processed. And, from back in the day, illegally downloading training manuals from like BitTorrent and Napster and stuff like that, taking all of that and I'm really fleshing out the ideas, and that was 18 months later, 400 pages, and so much red pen of spelling mistakes in the book. We actually have it launched, and that's what really inspired me is to, you know, for something when I'm long gone, I'll still be here in some way in the profession, and that's something that really inspired me to do. You know,
I definitely agree with that. There's nothing like having a physical book. And I think when social media blew up, all these trainers thought ebooks were the answer, but usually people
yeah,
just download them, save them on their desktop, never come back to them. Whereas a
yes,
physical book, you have soccer players who can constantly refer back to the methods you're discussing. And I have a lot of training books like that where it's something you just reread constantly. So I want
yeah,
to dive into the methods in your book. You
yeah,
talk a lot about how the bare minimum is learning to sprint, but then the
hmm,
ultimate goal is sprinting to compete and sprinting to win. So what do
yes.
you mean by that?
You've done your homework. Your listeners will be grateful for that. So, um, the I guess that the generalization of it came from my frustration in rugby, where bigger is better, and same with like football, American football. It's just lift weights and hit people, and so by the time an athlete who is maybe starts lifting weights 15, 16, there or thereabouts, can get the green flag, they've actually played the sport of a version for about 8 years before. They're like, I mean, I started playing football, soccer at 4 years old, rugby from seven. And I only started lifting weights at 17. So it's 10 years of actually learning the game before touching anything performance enhancing. And then it's a completely backwards equation because the general role of training should support the role of playing the sport. The general physical preparation, just be fit and healthy. Well, most athletes are already fit and healthy. So they don't, the general training is completely lost on them. And there's a Tudor Bomper was one of the grandfathers of periodization. I'm a big S&C historian, but anything past the 70s is, apart from Louis Simmons, is wasted on me. And because I believe our futures lies in our past and the origins of our profession. And so he came up with training age. So 0 to 2 years of structured, organized training would give you a learning to train and then training to train. And I just thought, oh, I'll just scrap that out and substitute it with speed because speed age is what we're really after. Players want to run fast, and most of them are generally prepared anyway. What they are lacking is the specific preparation. So they don't understand. And what we find is that they really don't understand velocity in their bodies. People will try and run fast, but it's not intensive, it's effort driven. We have a lot of effort when we try to run fast, which doesn't create intensity, which is what we need. So what I was able to do from that top line is actually look at the players that I was working with, and I've had international rugby players, for example, guys in the NFL, who have a learning to sprint age. And we've also got, in our academies, 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds who have a learning to sprint age because of the points I've discussed. These top level professionals are so good at their sport and they have natural predispositions and genetics that have allowed them to excel at it, but they still can't move masterfully. And that's where we're chasing it, chasing the pursuit of mastery. So when we get an athlete from, that learning to sprint age, we get so many personal bests. Like it's frightening. You can get like Alex Gray, who was the first UK player on the pathway stuff to sign an NFL deal. We got him to 23 mile an hour as a tight end in the learning to sprint phase. And that shows the power of removing a lot of the junk, addressing the body as it would. And he was 6'6" and he would have been 260 pounds at the time and 23 mile an hour. So it's a big goose coming down the track at you. And within that, you can see that if we can apply some of the fundamental principles of training, but replace the equipment that we use in the gym and replace them with more specific preparation means, then we open up this whole door and this whole window, which it's almost we're looking this way to try and find the answer that's this way the whole time, you know? And so that's kind of as the methodology and the frameworks, you know, there's 8 frameworks inside the system that work holistically. That really sets the foundation. You've got to know your speed age before you come in, or make some sort of interpretation of it. So hopefully that explains that for you.
No, I've seen a lot of soccer players, they'll be fast with the linear sprinting, and like you said, they're making PRs and everyone's oohing and aahing. But to
Yeah.
your point, it is the bare minimum and just
Mhm.
that starting point. But there's also that speed that actually translates to the game and gives you an edge as you continue to go through your career and reach the next level. So let's talk about tactical speed and how to develop that, because there's fast players who are slow thinkers. So they're not
Yeah.
going to be as fast as maybe a player with a slower mile per hour. So that's where I love soccer, because
Mm.
anyone can get an edge if they train
Yeah.
appropriately.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's so good. And do you know who are the worst for it, apart from the athletes themselves and parents? They're like, well, so and so got this on his GPS. Do some of your athletes? I don't want to get you in trouble for your listeners, but some of your athletes have GPS.
Yes, they do. And well, what I find is girls are competing against how many miles they're covering. And they think
Oh
that
wow.
who has more miles covered in the game, they had a better game. So
Yeah.
we can
Yeah.
dive into that as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in short, we just call them middle distance runners then, not soccer players.
Right.
So the so and it's it's when the motivation of these tools become an issue, and so when we if your listeners and we think about it from a pyramid point of view, and if you think about an iceberg as the easiest analogy, you've got so much below the water, and everything below the water only prepares you to play the game and prepares you to handle the training of the game, rather than, we always equate that a an increase in our gym numbers is going to automatically have an increase in our speed on the field and our availability, and it couldn't be further from the truth. And so what we have is we have this line, and I draw a real line in the process of writing the book as well. You My editor made me cry on many occasions because he was like, get more concise. And we speak in so many generalized terms all the time as coaches, when actually we need to put you know, our reputation on the line and say, this is how you do it. And this is how you do it for this type of person in this situation. We have to get better at that as a profession, I believe, especially in field sports, because historically I have this vision in my head. It's like you've got this individual, this athlete, and then you have a line and the game. And then off that, you have we do fitness like a middle distance runner. We do jump training like a high jumper. We do strength training like a power lifter. We do Olympic weightlifting like a weightlifter. And every other specific sport we try to train like to become a soccer player. When if we just said, well, why don't we create better soccer players? We would know as soon as we work backwards from that, the number one skill that we do without the ball is running. So everything must prepare us for running. And fitness for the game and preparation for the game is produced in the training of the game. Physical preparation coach's job is to prepare the athlete to train for the game. So when we think about tactical speed, which is right at the top, we've got general speed and specific speed. Now we're above the water of the iceberg. We then have specialized speed and tactical speed. When we look at tactical speed in those players that the Forrest Gumps, they'll just go. They'll just run, and they don't know what they're doing. Sometimes they run so fast, they arguably some of them will run away from the ball itself. What we miss again in that pursuit of mastery is understanding how our speed and our movement can directly influence the game and make winning outcomes for the game. So if we are a left fullback, for example, how what do I know about my speed that if we're counter attacking and the goalie's come out and taken it from a cross, what do I know about my speed where I can get that? My keeper knows how far she can throw that ball, and I'll be able to get it at full tilt and we'll break the line. That is a tactical speed example. And knowing with that how far Cristiano Ronaldo is brilliant at it, is how far I can tow a ball in front of me and still increase my speed whilst dribbling. He was really good at it. Ryan Giggs before for him for Man United, and many different players. So when we're looking at that, when we look at these players, we kind of have to then re-generalize them into archetypes because that helps us as well. So in my system, especially coming from rugby, you look around the gym, or you look around your gym, the players that you work with, and you'll know who the tactician is. So who's the games player? Who just sits and pulls the string and speed is not their main thing? Who's the sprinter? So someone may do track in the summer or may have done track really well. They get on the field and they've got speed to burn, but they couldn't hit the target if it was the size of a billboard. You've then got the crossfitter, or the middle distance runners, so the girls that just love volume. They're like, I've ran so far, but their GPS is then running round and round and round in circles. And then you kind of got like the power lifter, so the ones that would just love to lift weights and want to lift weights. So each one of those will represent their own different challenge on the way that we develop them, but they will also express themselves tactically in different ways. And our job as a coach is to understand, well, with our games player who sits in the pocket, that number 10 role, well, what if we gave him or her half a yard of extra acceleration, just a little bit? Because we know sometimes they get caught in possession thinking about it because the players can't read off them. Well, why don't we teach that player to, outside of the foot control, lateral acceleration, just a two-step burst, and then recover and play on. So there's many different ways, and then in many different scenarios, and this is where it's so important. The power of actually developing what I like to call team sport sprinters is understanding how we prepare them for the most frequent tasks that they have to perform specific to the game. I told you, they're very long answers. I like going off on tangents, but hopefully that helps. Do you
It
feel the same?
does. Yeah, I'm just wondering because I think the listeners want to get a picture of certain drills they can do
Uh-huh.
on their own or with a
Yep.
teammate or friend.
Yep.
So would it be just various reactive drills, mirror drills to just
Mm.
train that thinking component? Or like what are some of your favorite drills that you have to help with the tactical speed?
Yeah, great question. So what I would ask, and I speak to every player that I say, what do you do best? What do you do best on the field? Tell me that. Paint me that picture. And because you might have this as well, Erica, when athletes will come to you and they say, I want to improve my speed, and they'll say, why? Well, you'll say why, and they'll always give you a sport related reason. They'll always tell you, I can't get to the byline quick enough. Or, I worked with a female professional soccer player over here, and she was a left back, and she kept getting caught on the inside. The wingers would always just cut in. They keep getting caught. And so what we're actually starting to dive into here now is the anticipation, the skill of anticipation, and the anticipatory nature of speed. Do you know your gears? And when we talk about that with players, is actually how much juice do you need to burn to actually do what you need to do well. So if I was to that one example that they talked about with the left back, the full back. I was discussing this with an EPL coach over here that I work with. Is actually they've got a really fast left back, really fast, underutilized. Well, the reason being is because that relationship with the goalie is not being developed yet, and he doesn't know his read. So if you think about the relationship between a goalkeeper and a left back, it's the same as a quarterback and a wide receiver. You need that goalie to put that ball on a dime for that left back on a counter play. So players can practice, if they're a left back, for example, they can practice those long sloping accelerations to meet a ball as the ball keeps going forward, because you don't want to check back on it, you don't want to get too close to it or overrun it. Then if we think from a defensive point of view, I want to see my centre backs. I want to know a lot of centre backs struggle on the turn. They turn like a boat, that we'll say in the UK, some centre backs. So they get caught on the turn. And the reason why they get caught on turn is because all of their weight is too distributed in the wrong direction. They get caught, offset, centered heavy, because they lose their spacing between the person they're marking, usually the centre forward. So how I would work that with, even two people, all you need is a cone on the ground with the centre back, just a little cone on the ground, and the centre back and a player who's going to thread a ball. And I would, to make it easier, we would get the player to thread the ball in front of the centre back down the channel, make it harder, thread it behind over the shoulder, so they've got to turn and recover. And the whole idea of that is understanding everything will be coming forward. We've got that cone. We understand the space that we need. We don't want to get too close to the marker. And then the ball gets played. And the ball is played to catch the centre back out, but the ability to then jab step into the ground, cross over, 3 steps of acceleration, and then clean up the mess is what we would start to train, and we would repeatedly train that. That would be put for reps. So does that help?
Yeah, it definitely does. I really like that you asked the player why they want to get faster. I think that can just give the coach just an insight into the reps that they need to get in the training. Now, I do
Yeah.
want to backtrack to the learning to sprint, because
Hmm.
I'm seeing in the youth soccer space, they're not even starting and doing that bare minimum. They
Mm.
might do it in the summer off season for 2 months at most,
Yeah.
but then they fall off with their max velocity training throughout the whole year, so they're not even
Mm.
getting that exposure to really
Mm.
build that speed in the first place. So, why is that important for soccer players to continue to do throughout the year?
Yeah. That's a great question. And so, excuse me, the again, we come back to that pyramid of understanding preparation, and that is the thing that is being completely lost. And why I wrote the book is that's one of the reasons, because arguably lots of coaches really don't know how to prepare people to play the sport properly, and where maximum speed, if we were to think of the most important quality that any player can have without touching the ball, is going to be top speed, then acceleration. Everything else below that is should be in place. I say should be to develop those two qualities. So if a youth athlete, for example, or any athlete, because what they learn when they're young is the things that they take through into their senior years anyway, and um, and so when when they're developing their habits around training and their relationship with training, being tired coming out of a session is not always a good thing. Feeling energized and like you've just had a boost is the right thing, and that's what maximum speed will do for you. And because if I was to give a player and were only able to do one thing, I would do long accelerations. We call them long accelerations. They're 50-meter build-ups. Last 5, 8 meters are 8, 8.5, 9 out of 10. Okay, and you've got all the time to get there. That that exercise is more stimulating than anything you can do in the gym. Anything. So if we develop, because of the cultural relationship around training and the biases that people have, well, I need to maintain my strength. So I need to maintain my strength so I'm strong for the season. Well, that's actually going to detrain you for the game. What you need to be doing is make sure that you're staying loose. You need to make sure that you are maintaining the coordinative abilities, the preventative abilities. It's almost like a maximum speed is the biggest vaccine that you can have for anything. And just last week, I had the pleasure of visiting a young female rugby player who's just coming back from her ACL. And she's about 8 months post, and she was really fast before the ACL happened, and she's way ahead of it, way ahead of all of her rehab. Why? Because she wasn't strong. She'd never lifted a weight before in her life, but she was fast. If you had put a weight in her hand, she would be able to lift lots because she was fast. She's not strong now because she has done weight training. It's that inherent speed that has allowed her to boost. So for many players, ensuring that I have to do my skills and then I have to make sure I hit my speed in the different variations. And then if I've got time, maybe do a little bit of weights. And that's how I would prioritize it. I've recently had a player. I work with lots of Gaelic sports athletes. So they've got hurling and football, Gaelic football. Are you familiar with those two? The
I
Irish
am.
sports? Yeah. Yeah. So so we had a hurling player, and he didn't touch a weight for 6 weeks with him. Didn't touch a weight for 6 weeks, and was able to hit 21, 22 mile an hour in training and in games every week whilst doing 30K weeks. The only training that we did outside of that was yoga, and that was it. Because when the money's in the bank, you just leave it there. You just leave it there, and then you can start to manage. Because any other training, if you think of your readiness for any of your listeners, you're just drawing that line. And when you feel tired, you're already at -1. If you rock up to training and you're tired, you're at -1. Your job is to get back to 0. And we see it in professional football, soccer over here, where the guys can play like 50, 60 games a year, which is just ridiculous. All they do after 4 or 5 weeks, they just adapt to this chronically fatigued state. And your job is to never get there. Don't get there before it's too late, and make sure that that relationship and understanding. Well, if I've got a spare half an hour, I either need to be stretching or doing my speed work, and then I'm good to go because my job's to score goals. You know.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, that's brilliant, and I do agree with you that speed training is the ultimate vaccine for
Mm,
reducing injuries and giving players that boost and to get those incremental speed improvements over the year. And I found with my girls who train year round, when we even do speed just once a week, they stay healthy and they're
yes.
rarely sore and they recover
Mm,
quickly. And it's so important, and I don't know about you, but the longer I've gotten in my career, I've just gotten a lot more conservative with the weight training in the sense we don't do as many exercises and as much volume as we used to do. Would you
mhm.
say the same?
Yeah, 100%. Because the goal of general training is to not do general training. There's two or three real staple sayings that I live by, and that is one of them. I think we have an obsession with general fitness. Um, let's just use the term CrossFit, for example, is an
Mhm,
obsession of general fitness. We're athletes, we're sports people, you know, and we have to train differently. And the other thing as well is that strength adapts to the context of which it is developed. Okay. And it's such an important. I was on a call working with a coach yesterday, and he was his first call, and I felt bad for saying it, but I always ask this question. I said, if your football players didn't know that weights exist, do you reckon you would do them? Do you reckon they would do them? And he just started laughing because it's true. We wouldn't. They wouldn't do it. They just play football and create different variations to overload. And so, you know, if we were to just flip the script on that, what we're really talking about there is the role of specialization. So from you've got lots of young athletes you work with all the way up to collegiate athletes as well, right? So you got full spectrum. They're going to be at different phases of what we would call specialization. And what you'll find is so many athletes will be like, oh, I'll just do last year's off-season program and expect to get different results. You can do the same thing. And your body's going to go, oh, we've done this before. I'll take a back seat. And so one of the systems that we use with our academies, so I run a few academies here in the UK, um, helping. It was funny when I was working in professional sports, I was writing programs for the academies that I was at, and I saw that the amount of players that are at low level, they don't get the extra provision. So I was like, oh, we'll just start one. And that's 10 years ago. But um, the and the irony is, if you get the preparation right, we had a guy that couldn't get into a professional team who has now got international trials at under 18s, but he was completely overlooked. So the role from a youngster to be able to start physically developing themselves appropriately and with respect to weight training, we use 1x20 a lot from Dr. Michael Yesis. And it's a wonderful system. And we create that based around peak height and peak weight velocity. So when they get the growth spurts so when your athlete gets bigger or your athlete gets heavier, we change it and we always revert back. It's like if you've grown an inch, well, you come down 2 levels. Play snakes and ladders with it, basically. If you're going 3 inches, you're back to square one because you've got more range than your body can handle. And that's where we see lots of ACLs. We see lots of problems. And again, the reason why the 1x20 system works so well is that it's low volume, even though it's 20 reps, it's one set. You get lots of variety and you don't burn out. I've even had adults doing 1x20 hitting lifetime PRs. And so that role of specialization, there's a beautiful window for it. And if I get my athlete from, say they're going, they've come all the way through with me and they're at college, maybe trying to look to get pro trials and stuff like that, our off-season period would look nothing like what they started with. The weight training would probably be to help recover and maybe manage some old injuries and some local tissue tolerance, and that's about it. But everything else would hardly spend, would spend 10% of the time in the weight room, as opposed to 30-40% from when they're young. So hopefully that helps the way that we would distribute training differently. I always see it as like in the adventure movies, like Indiana Jones, he's running and the ground's falling away from behind him as he's running. Like, you can't go back. That's the role of weight training. It's just falling away from you. Its viability. So hopefully your listeners will get that movie reference as well.
I hope so. I was a big Indiana Jones fan. I know the
Love it.
exact scene. Yep.
Yeah,
Um,
love it.
so I guess for just like on the weight training topic, a lot of people be like, well, female athletes, ACLs, we have to strengthen the hamstrings, the calves, the quads, the muscles that safeguard the knee. So are you like totally anti strength training or like,
No,
okay.
I'm not. I think if we go back and this is I think the best coaches as well. I spend more time thinking about psychology than I do thinking about training application, because we have to understand people's attachments and we have to understand people's cultural attachments to training. And so strength training has an attachment of lifting weights in the gym. So that's our antecedent. And how that manifests itself is the need to lift weights. So that's how that feedback loop goes. If I don't lift weights, I'm not getting stronger. So it's the overcoming of Newton's first law, inertia. That all we're thinking about is one very simple type of strength, which is not representative anywhere on the field of play. Does it have a role? Absolutely. But I would argue and encourage anyone to start to consider if you're broken, if you're rehabbed, yes, you need it because you need to build that cross sectional area. You need it. It's really, really important. If for female athletes as well, with the ACL risk and lots of different things, I would start to challenge the way that we prepare the female athlete to play soccer to prevent the ACL, because no one's torn an ACL in the gym. So strength, unless they're very silly. So strength adapts to the context of which it's created. So if we want to help prevent ACLs, we need to bridge and start to build the thread between a single leg skater squat and a bound and an acceleration and a cut turn. And we need to build all that through, because a split squat is only going to allow you to handle the reps of acceleration and allow you to handle that. So I'm always asking the question is, what way am I going to push my dominoes down in this training scenario? How am I going to do that? And sometimes it's a case that we need to spend more time, we need more dominoes at the beginning and less at the end, because of that training age and the responder type as well. So some people just don't respond to training in the same way, so they need a little bit more nurturing. If you've got a girl and she's struggling just to put on a bit of quad mass, and because mass is protective, we need to address that appropriately. We need to address that. I definitely am completely anti the idea that your score on a Nord board is going to prevent you from a hamstring or an ACL. You know, they just give me cramp. I've been terrible at Nordics my whole life, but I've ran 23, 24 mile an hour at 100 kilos. Where's the attachment? And that's the most important thing. And that's how you dial in as well with a parent, with a player. Again, we go back to those archetypes. Well, I'll give my bodybuilder or my powerlifter type, I'll give them a little bit more, because it will make them feel better until they start to understand that what they're doing here is not enough anymore. And then that's that journey that we take them on. I worked with a professional rugby player who was a fly half, and so like the quarterback, and he won the Golden Boot 3 years in a row, which is the most points scored in the English Premiership. And his name was Andy Good, Goode. For any of you people listening, it's hilarious because there's a great big picture of him with a big belly, and he went on holiday, and he came back with what we coined lilo leg. So he got an adductor tendinopathy from lying on a lilo drinking beers for 2 weeks. Came back, Golden Boot again, because he was a tactician. And I was there for 3 or 4 years. He didn't squat anymore. He did like goblet squats or split squats, and he did the same weight that he started with in the 3 years, and he retired. But he was so valuable on the field. And all he knew is that gets me by. I'm not a fast guy. I'm a skillful guy. So I'll just appease people. So that's the real late specialization, where you kind of got Joe Montana. You're not going to get him to lift more weights, are you? It's that same relationship and understanding that. That was a very long answer, so I do apologize.
Don't apologize. I appreciate I appreciate the long answers. It's so funny that you mentioned the NOR boards. I feel the same way about like heavy back squats and power
Mhm,
cleans and just soccer players continuing to do these same movements over again and put on more weight and make the post on Instagram that they're back squatting this much. And good for you. I mean, it's great you're motivated and you love getting in the gym, but I also asked the question, how much is that helping you get more resilient to injury on the field? And are you
yeah,
adding in those other movements like pistol
mhm,
squats or skater squats or multi-directional single leg jumps? It's just I think sometimes we tend to put all of our focus on that heavy lifting piece, when it
yeah.
is way more multifaceted for female athletes.
And do you know what's really interesting? And it's like the thing that no one ever talks about, that when you lift heavy weights, you desensitize the elastic ability of the working tissue. So it actually makes you worse. And so if you were to compound that over time, it just causes lots of problems. And now, if I was a business person, I'm going to, in 2025, I'm opening a tech company in sports science because we are in the tech era. I'm going to try and I'm going to do Nord board for elbows. That's what I would do because that's all people care about now is measuring the insignificance. And that's me being incredibly sarcastic as well, by the way. I wouldn't do something that stupid. But the that again we have to work hard to really shield our players from this as well. Because what's my jump score? What's my Nordball score? My recruiter says I need to get this on a force plate. My and in reality, the combine, the chaos in the combines actually completely detrained every sport related quality out of people. And it's like, oh, I need to jump this in a combine. And it's like, well, you have to specialize in combine prep rather than sport prep. So you have to unlearn all that stuff because I've prepped people for combines. It's the biggest waste of time ever because then you have to train them all over again to play the game. So I always say to my players, there's two numbers that you really need to consider. And they're the most important numbers that you need to consider when preparing for your sport. The amount of points you're going to score and your signing bonus. And that is it. They're the two most important things because, from a professional idea, that's how you make your living and it's short careers. So you need to be really good at the other one. And that's just an extrinsic, an intrinsic motivator for them. I'm going to make more money if I score more goals. Well, yes, you are, you know?
Well, I think there's this mindset in the strength and conditioning world that, if you give your athletes more to do in a workout in the gym, they're going to feel like they did a great workout, but
Yeah.
really less can be more
Yeah.
sometimes, well, most of the time. And I actually had a girl the other day say, "Oh my gosh, like I've really gotten some muscle definition." And we do
Yeah.
maybe three things when they come in. And
Yeah.
it's only like once or twice a week during the
Yeah.
season, and it's like, you don't need to be killing yourself in the gym to build muscle, have a good body composition, be a good soccer player, and you also will be more recovered and more fresh and ready for practice, which is the goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's just so interesting, and I think the people who are starting to wake up are realizing less is definitely more in the gym.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you know, again, with the amount of information available, uh, people are just becoming more stupid, and myself included. Like we become over reliant on things that don't matter, and so like social media is terrible for athletes. I just basically took a month. I took a month off it after I wrote the book, and I picked my phone up and I was like, oh my god, it's really big. I was like, this in the screen. Oh Jesus, put it back away. And so because the influence is, oh, I want to do this. I need to be training this way. And actually, you don't. What you need to do is do you. You need to find out what works for you and keep doing it. And that takes someone who is brave, especially today. I think it's really brave to say, do you know what? I don't need to work out today because I feel a bit tired and I got training tomorrow. I got practice tomorrow and I want to be right for it. If I feel good, I'll do a bit of work next time. Understanding that it's the third most important thing that we do, but as it's the third most important thing, it's a really important thing when we do it. And that's a really important notion for, especially for young athletes and people who want a long career. Um, we can talk about chasing professional sport and high level collegiate sport in America and all those sorts of things. But what about just playing the game that you love to play for as long as you can play it as well? And that's a really important role that coaches have, because I've been inside the meat grinder of professional sport and that's what it is. And there's so many players that give up and they're burnt out and they're broken. And I guess, having that holistic view of preparation and performance can really help us as coaches know, if I get my menus and my training set up right, I'm going to maintain enjoyment for my athletes. They're going to feel fast. We're here to talk about speed. We're definitely going to make them faster. That's the easy bit, right? And we're going to keep them engaged because they're going to reap the benefits on the field. And the more engaged the athlete is, the more motivated they're going to be. They're going to enjoy it. And if they're enjoying it, they're going to play better. And that's the cycle that we want to create for our people, especially the little ones, and even the big ugly ones that don't tell us that they're not enjoying it, though we know they're not enjoying it.
Wow, what you just said there can open up another hour of discussing. So I do have a couple questions just to wrap this up about the young ones. So
Yeah.
you mentioned social media and just all of the noise, and I see a lot of parents of young ones especially looking around at everything on social media and the types of training that is out there for really young
Mm-hmm.
kids,
Mm-hmm.
and they're falling into this idea of, oh, my 10-year-old needs to be with this coach because he trains professional athletes. But the
Yeah.
training isn't age based, maturity based, it is advanced. It's already like really specific. So
Yeah.
let's talk about why young kids need a different type of speed training than a professional athlete, and how parents really need to stand their ground and do research on this to have the right coach at that age.
100%. And one of the easiest ways that we can sort of really simplify this is, would you let your young athlete drive a Ferrari? Absolutely not, would you?
We can end the
And
podcast right there.
but the reason being, and it goes back to why our youngest kid that we had in our academy was like 9 years old. And what we did do, and what good coaches do, and what responsible parents do, is that they understand the physical preparation gaps that are not delivered by current education curriculums, and they seek out people who can do that for them. And that's the most important part. So my 10-year-old doesn't need to be working with so and so because he trains pros. Do you know that is the sideline competition? That's the parents' conversation competition. My guy plays with this guy. It's like there's a British comedy on Netflix called Motherland. It's all about the school mums. It's hilarious. It's exactly that. So and so does this with so and so, and meanwhile the kid on the field is about to tear a hamstring. So what we are looking for, especially at those young age where we're still fostering relationships with sport, because sport is much bigger than the attributes itself. There's so many life lessons in it, that what you don't want them to feel is tired, burnt out, the pressure to go and work with a coach who works with professionals. That's horrendous for a young person, a young brain to understand. And they need to be, oh, I want you to jump on this box. I want you to pick this thing up and go and carry it for me. I want you to see how many push ups you can do. And next time I want to see if you can beat that. I want you to enjoy and be motivated to work hard at the right pace. And your job and my job, we're facilitators of that. And we let the clock do its job. And that's a really important part, because if we if you instill and foster good relationships with training at young ages, like our lads, they have to shake the coach's hand, they have to look him in the eye, they have to say hello, they have to say thank you, and they have to say goodbye. Then when they're in there, they work hard. And work hard is just effort. Show up, just work, give me effort. And then that's all that it takes, because then they do enjoy their sport. Because our guys, I think from over 10 years, as you'll know this with your girls, they don't get hurt. We don't get any growth related injuries that put people out of sport, and participation is dropping as they get to those 15, 16 years old. It drops off because they're knackered, and they don't enjoy it anymore. Whereas we want them, to keep going. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel about the situation.
I'm totally stealing the Ferrari analogy. That was brilliant.
You just
um,
say it to a parent and walk off.
yeah, it's so good. And yeah, I think the parents who hire the trainer who mainly works with professional athletes, they want those bragging rights. They
Yep,
want to tell the other parent that their kid's working with so and so. But my question is always, well, if this trainer is working with professional athletes, how much time does this trainer actually have to research child development, really work with young kids? Are they a master of that craft? Some of the
yep,
best youth coaches and trainers only work with youth.
yep, yep,
So
100%.
it's something to think about. And I get asked this question all the time for speed development for the young ones. Should they hire a mechanics coach to do track drills and help them work on A skips and B skips? And I'm
Mm,
wondering your answer to that question.
absolutely not. They don't, because you know, again, it's another. It's a bit of a cutthroat analogy. It's like, is your kid wearing adult's clothing yet? Then they shouldn't train like an adult. When we are still growing, they are still growing. So why do we need to reinforce mechanics in that way? Any coach who's worth their salt that works with youth will understand the role of utilizing exercises that help develop running mechanics and help develop that. But when Florence, I've used a very typical British name there for you, when Florence grows like 3 inches over the
You
summer
use
holiday,
Florence, we use like little Johnny.
little Johnny, John Smith, the very
Yeah.
English, yeah. So, but when they grow, like, you're just going to do the same thing over and over again. And I would fire a little warning shot that if your coach who works with pros is like wanting to pick up these young developing athletes, then he's probably not working with that many pros, because what you would then be is a cash cow. You'd be easy money from. And that's something to be wary of, because everyone's worked with so and so in the off season, aka they saw that person across the gym and gave them a towel. Those are the things that parents need to be wary of. You have to really trust. And in the company with the academies, I dedicated one coach who used to work with us. That's your job. He was so good at it as well. And you have to have a way of working with young kids. You have to. There is just an art form. You have to really understand your own inner child to really work well with kids and play, because they won't respond. You can play with them and engage in the way that they will engage with you, but still carry respect as a leader. And it's a really fine balance. And not a lot of people can do it. And that's what gets the best out of them. and I think that's really important. So those mechanics, you could do a time lapse of a kid doing the same drill over 5 years, and it will look 500 different ways until it starts to look good. And that's the goal, and that's all you need to do. You know.
Well, it kind of takes us back to where we started the conversation with the end goal is to train game speed. And
Mm,
if a young kid is constantly doing these mechanics drills where they're being told the answer and where to position their body, when are they going to develop creativity and better decision making that translates to soccer?
mhm.
So that's always my
Well,
question.
yeah, 100%. Like, how do you, because anyone who excels in sport at whatever level, and all we're looking for is the gap between where they are now and what they're able to be. That's it. That's all you want from someone. That gap is unlocked by creativity, not an autocratic relationship with a coach. They have to go and explore. They have to go and try and learn to see things before they happen. They have that anticipatory nature of sport, which is, they're like, how did she do that? And that's what we want to achieve. So if we are tell all the time, then they've got too much information. That happens a lot of professional sport. Like, everyone's watched an NFL game and they're structured their first 12 plays, and you're running your predetermined routes and stuff like that. Soccer, rugby, lacrosse, so chaotic. And when we have chaos, we have so much freedom. And when you can sit in that space and you've got instead of a 5 gear, you've got a 9 gear, and you can put the jets on whenever you need. And you see that ball and you're like, done my speed work, I've got this. You can break a game. And that's what we want. But if you have a coach telling you, look out for that ball, you're not going to feel it. And that's what we're trying to give them, more opportunity to feel the game, as it were.
And it is more enjoyable to have a training session that is stimulating and inspires creativity and good decision
Yeah.
making. And you'll find this funny. I experimented with a group of 10-year-olds for a couple minutes trying to teach mechanics. They fell off in 30 seconds. They were
Yeah.
looking around, they were picking the grass, they were talking with one another, and I was like, "Yep, exactly."
Yeah.
And then as soon as you tell them, "Hey guys, like chase that ball," or "We're gonna play leap over the pond and jump over these different obstacles," they're all in. They're like laser focused.
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
then they're laughing and smiling, and it's amazing to see, but it should be common sense, right?
Hmm.
But a
Yeah.
lot of
It should be.
parents, they still want the shiny objects and the coach who supposedly trains pros and does all the mechanics drills.
Yeah, and it's a great place, especially the developing athlete, because you're using like external constraints and imagination. Like
Yeah.
ladders are so good for that sort of age group, the development. I did a rugby camp in Switzerland last year. My French is not the best, and neither's my Swiss. Um, and so I'll just put the ladders on the ground, and I was like, just copy me. It was the easiest thing ever, and they were babies. You know, the ones where they look like they're wearing their older brother's kit to training, sort of thing, and they just loved it, and they got better, and that's all you can ask for.
And they wanna come back too, which you want kids to have a good taste in their mouth towards training and
Yes,
competing. That's the most important. Now, I
yeah,
know we're over an hour. Is there anything else you wanna talk about or maybe plug your book?
yeah. I mean, I'll keep going. I tell you what. I'll come back. I'll come back
Yeah, you'll
another
be a
time if you'll
repeat
have me.
guest, obviously. I mean, I this was so fantastic, so thank
We've,
you.
I've got to beat Carmen, or maybe you and Carmen could do a call together. That would be amazing.
I'm gonna text her right after this.
Yeah, amazing.
I'll get your
Um,
contact I'll get your contact too, we'll get a group chat going.
yeah, outstanding. So I guess really, if I was to give some take homes for people listening to this, is number one, don't get lost in trying to prepare too much for the sport you play because you're only judged on how you play the sport. That's really important. And if you're going to prepare to play sport, make sure you understand that 99% of the activity you do on the field is without the ball and it is running. So everything needs to be in place to develop the ability to run fast, change direction, move freely. And if you do that, you'll be more resistant to injury. You'll enjoy the game. All your weight room numbers will go up. And, for a lot of people, a lot of athletes who struggle with flexibility, if you can improve your speed, you will become more flexible purely by accident because it's the way that the muscles work. You will loosen up. So I'd give those three as really big take homes. And as you eloquently suggested, I do have a book out. It is called The Sport Speed System. It's available on Amazon. Um, and yeah, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Sam@coachsportman.co.uk. And I just think if we can all start preparing our athletes and care as much as obviously you do, Erica, about yours, then the profession will move in the right direction. So thank you so much for having me.
Of course. I'll leave all the book links in the caption below, as well as Sam's social media links. And if you want him to come back and be a repeat guest, like the video. So thank you everyone for listening. We hope you learned a lot, and I will see you on the next episode.